Hey guys, this is Adwukta, ADWCTA, and this is the Grand Tournament TGT Arena Meta Preview. We have just finished talking about the whole meta in general and how it was slowing down, and how 5 drops are going to become a thing, 3 drops are going to be more consistent, 1 drops are going to become much less consistent, and everything's kind of slowing down a little, while the hero power usage is also going up. That all seems, with that as the background, we're going to look at how this is going to affect each class. And we're going to start at the top because these are the classes that you probably use the most often, and these are the classes that you will definitely see the most often. There's going to be a little bit of change here. So we're going to start with the Paladin, which probably, I think, maybe Shaman aside, has the biggest change that's coming in the arena. And that is partly because of its cards. Here are the 3 common cards. Let's look at the first 2 first. Seal of Champion, Warhorse Trainer. Seal of Champion is actually not bad, right? It's kind of like a Blessing of Kings. It's kind of like imagine it's a 3 mana +3/+3. It'll have a similar effect most likely to whatever targets it's attacking. You just can't buff it and leave it alone. So it's not as good as a Blessing of Kings, of course, but it won't be that far off. It's certainly closer to that than to a Hand of Protection, which doesn't change the board math. So your opponent would still be playing on expectations, right? So this changes the expectations. 3 mana is kind of an awkward mana, but it'll be a pretty good card. And the Warhorse Trainer, 2/4, not that good, but once you get a couple dudes out, it does its job. And then a Murloc Knight, Inspire, summon a random Murloc. It's actually a ton of value. The random Murloc is not as small as you may think it is. It's easily worth 2 mana. And so in addition to the 1/1 dude that you get, people have been doing analysis on this online, and they're right. It's going to be very good value. And if it survives its turn, it's going to be ridiculous value. And it's a common card. But what it is it's slow, right? It's not a 4-drop. And it's one more 4 mana card that the Paladin has to deal with. So it's kind of this natural arena balancing going on this card. So it'll be good, but it's not quite one of those earlier game plays. And same with Warhorse Trainer, and same with Seal of Champions, kind of maybe. But the whole idea behind this is that these are not terribly great cards. They're pretty good, but they're not great. So the Paladin's already falling a little behind compared to some of its peers, which have gotten some seriously good cards. And 2, they're late game. The Paladin's early game was always very suspect, right? It had no drops. It had no cards that you can just throw on the board, no class cards, until the Shielded Minibot came along. And once the Shielded Minibot came along, it kind of revolutionized the Paladin. And what's going to happen? The Shielded Minibot is going to be offered significantly less often because of the dilution in the card pool. And the Paladin has no alternative way of kind of putting on the early pressure, right? You can put out a minion and then try to get an Argent Protector on top of it, but that's not... It's still good, but it's not game-endingly good if you do it on turn 3. So you have to have the coin. If they remove it, if they remove your first minion, you have no real answers. And so it's really the Shielded Minibot that a lot of this is revolving around. And when you get high up in the arena, you're almost guaranteed to see a Shielded Minibot on turn 2, right? There's a 50% plus chance that's going to happen. But when that doesn't happen, the Paladin has there's this kind of slippery slope trickle down kind of effect going on, where once the Paladin doesn't necessarily have the board in the beginning, they can't do a lot of things. None of their buffs are working out. They have to find a way to get back on the board. They don't have a lot of good tools to do that, and then they just kind of die, which is not good for the Paladin. And on top of all that, there is no hard removal in the Paladin. None at all. You have Equality, which is a rare that kind of is like a hunter's mark for multiple minions, but again, it affects your minions too, and it's a rare card. You have Aldor Peacekeeper and Humility, soft removals, and you can't leave them on the board, so you actually do have to still take care of the minion's defense with what you have on the board. So if you don't actually have a board, Humility and Aldor will only get you so far. So not a lot of comeback onto the board mechanisms for the Paladin in the arena. And when the board gets a little softer in the beginning for them, while the board gets much more consistent for a lot of its competitor classes, and we'll go into that, it's going to fall. And when the meta slows down and people are playing more and more big things, the fact that you have no hard removals is going to hurt. And it's going to hurt a lot. Right now, the way you play around Paladin is you try to figure out what's going on, and then when the board state looks favorable, you plop down a minion that has more than 4 health, right? Preferably more than 5 even, because you can always... Sometimes you just have to leave a 1/1 minion on the board. You just can't match the Paladin with the amount of minions they put out, right? And what are 5-drops? All these 5-drops are things with more than 4 health, right? Almost straight down the line. So you get more 5-drops that you want to pick, you get more other late game cards that you want to pick, and the Paladin is kind of screwed. The Paladin also doesn't have great ways to like push for lethal. It has a sword, which can be taunted, but that's it. Hammer of Wrath is only 3 damage, Consecration is only 2. It's not the best class for Reach. So all of this is going to really hurt the Paladin. And on top of that, the Paladin is also going to get a little more swingy because of that, right? Because if you have the shielded mini-bot and you do establish the board in the beginning, or you play a 3/2 Raptor and then you Argent Protected the next turn and you succeed in holding the board in the beginning, these cards aren't bad to get you snowballing even harder. In fact, they're pretty good at it. Seal of Champions, right? Mini Blessing of Kings, which is incredible. Murloc Knight, if it stays on the board for a turn, if you have the board kind of late in the game and they can't remove it on the first turn, it just gets some insane value. Remember, it summons a Murloc, and like half the Murlocs buff Murlocs, and this is a Murloc, so there's plenty of value to be had here. And even Warhorse Trainer, if you're playing an aggro style, your opponent has to remove the Warhorse Trainer, even if they may want to remove other things, because otherwise you get extra value every turn that you tap for. So it's still going to get those games where it just steamrolls you and there's nothing much you can do. But those games, the frequency of those games are going to be less. And it's going to have more games, on the other hand, where it doesn't get on the board or it loses the board and bad things happen, right? You can't get back on, you're just struggling, you feel like a priest. Not as bad as a priest, but you feel like a priest and just unable to establish yourself. Some of the rares... Here are the rares. Competitive Spirit. So we talked about Argent Lands before, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but these are not going to be as commonly seen in the arena. None of these are so good that they're like muster for battle kind of good, right? Competitive Spirit, though, is going to have this great effect on Avenge. Because Competitive Spirit basically says, the best thing you can do to me right now, when you're facing me, the Paladin, is you should remove my board. Maybe like leave 1 minion that you don't mind getting this 1/1 buff to trigger this this trap, this secret. Or you can just remove the whole board and then it doesn't trigger and it keeps delaying this value. 1 mana for +1/+1 is pretty good value on all your minions. But the fact that your opponent can remove a bunch before it triggers makes it really bad value, actually. The only thing that's saving this card is Avenge, which is a common, which is going to be better than this card. Pretty sure it's going to be better than this card still, and which disincentivizes the Paladin from disincentivizes players facing the Paladin from killing Paladin minions, and instead they should probably go face until they're set up enough that they can actually deal with the Avenge once they get the read. Now, you can't really get an Avenge read. You can't get any like 100% read on the Paladin until you kill a minion now, because there is this Competitive Spirit card. And it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough facing Paladins from this point on. And what it also does is it slows down the meta. Because before, when you see an Avenge that you can't take care of, the correct move is always to go face, right? It's never to trade and then buff your opponent's minions that you can't take care of. So when you start trading, or when you're a little more incentivized to trade, it still slows down the meta. Rather than the whole, like, it becomes a race where the Paladin can't get value from the Avenge unless you hit into it. You're not going to hit into it because you can't take care of it. But if you have the initiative that you're trying to figure out whether you hit into his minions or not, that means both of you are going face and the game ends quicker. So there's always that. Now the Tuskar Jouster, once more, bringing into the control meta. Just kind of a free heal 7 healthier hero sometimes. Not very reliable, but 5 mana, 5/5, pretty good. And the new epic cards that they released for the Paladin, they really haven't released either one of these before. Enter the Colosseum is like a brawl. There's really not much to be said for it. No one's going to play around it. You can't, it's going to happen very rarely. It's a pretty good card, because you can set it up in many ways. And the Paladin, remember, the Paladin has no good way to take care of large minions. Well, if your opponent drops 2 large minions, even in today's meta, that's GG for the Paladin. Your Paladin is not getting back without reach. So that's typically what you want to do, right? You want to find a way to clear the Paladin's board and then drop big things, and then keep the big things at high health. Now they can enter the Colosseum, but one of your big things will still be alive. So it's still not the best. What you actually want to do is try to like leave both players' smallest attack minion if possible, right? But it doesn't do that. So Brawl's even not that great. It's definitely a good card, and so is this card, but just not that great. Mysterious Challenger, Battle Cry, put one secret from your deck onto the battlefield. I can't believe it's not a legendary. It has such kind of an insane battle cry. That means one of every type of secret. So if you have like 3 secrets and they're all different types, all of them come onto the battlefield. And it's a 6 mana 6/6, which isn't bad in of itself, right? Even in this new like bigger thing kind of meta, having 6 health is very good. The 7 mana card, the 5/9, I can't take care of it. That trades with a 6/6. Boulderfist Ogres are going to happen a little less frequently, and there's no 6 drops, right? There's no good 6 drops that this meta has introduced. It's a bunch of 5 drops. What do 6/6s do? They eat 5 drops. So 6s are going to go up in value in the arena as well, and this card kind of fits in there while pulling in your secrets. So a very powerful card, but an epic. So the Paladin is going to suffer a lot, I think, with this incoming meta. The one thing that's actually going the Paladin way is that its hero power is it's probably the most flexible hero power, which means all the Inspire cards are, well, all the positive Inspire cards are generally significantly higher value for Paladin than other classes. It goes like Paladin, Mage, and then some of the other classes. So that's still going to favor the Paladin. But what are Inspire cards? Again, they're all late game cards. So the Paladin will have a lot of late game value, but it could be dead before then. And it's going to go back to what you saw with the Paladin in Classic, which is that it heals a lot, but it's a little unstable in the beginning, and then its consistency drops off compared to the Mage. Right now, people think it's as good as the Mage, a lot of people, even though I would argue the Mage is still better. But this is definitely going to fall, and it's going to fall significantly, and I think bold prediction is that the Paladin will be, at best, the 3rd best class, likely the 4th best class, behind Rogue and Druid, once this meta shakes itself out. But before we get onto the Rogue, we're not going to get to the Druid today. Let's talk about the Mage. This is actually going to be very quick. Key cards to watch for the Paladin. These are existing cards whose values I think will change, or the most likely targets to change. 1, Shielded Minibot. It gets rarer, but it gets more valuable because you like desperately need that card right now to win games as the Paladin once the meta hits. 2, Humility and Outdoor. They're soft removals, but they're basically all that you've got, right? Equality is the same deal. Any kind of hard removals that you can like figure your way into as the Paladin. And Avenge, of course, that's getting an obvious buff. Okay, so the Mage is in the exact opposite situation. It has hard removals. It has the most hard removals. As a Polymorph, as a Fireball, it's getting this guy, the Flame Lance. Wonderful, wonderful card. And you may be wondering with the Flame Lance, deal 8 damage to a minion. Wow. That seems like a lot of damage. That seems like overkill. Well, have you seen the new cards? It's not really overkill. A lot of cards have 7 health. A lot of cards have more than that. So a Flame Lance actually is a good way to become a hard removal. You'll find that Fireballs are actually going to feel like less and less of hard removals. Or if they are, they would take your whole entire turn anyway, and it's kind of iffy. And you're probably much better off like fireballing that 4-drop and putting out some tempo. And the other 2 cards that we're looking at are curve cards. Spellslinger is a very good curve card. We've talked about that already. Dollar and Aspirant is a 3/5 for 4, totally satisfactory for your curve, gain spell damage, kind of dangerous with a Mage, right? Like you don't want the Mage to have spell damage things on the board. So it becomes a target that needs to be removed. And these make the Mage curve out a little better. And it has people saying like, well, maybe Mage is now one of the best curving out classes. It is still behind, like definitely 100% behind at least 2 classes. One is Druid, especially with the new cards, and the other one is Warlock, which got a new 2, but it's always had a ton of 1-drops to play around with. And you can arguably even say that it now curves as well as, or maybe slightly less well than, like a Shaman, for example, or like a Priest. So I think it's kind of in the middle in terms of the curve. Definitely not the top curving out class, but it did get bolstered. And the meta is moving the mage's way, right? If everything slows down and you have the best hero power in the game and there's an inspire mechanic and your hero power does not have you take face damage, it's just free tempo and card advantage on the board every single turn by taking one health of things off the board. As long as there's something to ping, it's kind of incredibly good. So one thing that's going to be very nice about this new meta for the mages, and I know a lot of, especially a lot of average players, weaker players struggle with it a lot, which is Flame Strike, and that's going to be wonderful for you. And I don't just mean because you're going to see Flame Strike about 20% less often, which is freaking great. It's not really 20%. I think it's like 15% or something, because you're still going to pick it every time, and you still get 3 chances to get offered that card. So it's not like a straight card dilution kind of thing. But when you have 5-drops, it's a 5-drop meta. Remember, we're talking about the 5-drop meta. What are 5-drops? They're all Flame Strike resistant, right? They all have at least 5 health, but usually 6 or 7 health. And that's wonderful, because now you have more cards. There's more chances that you'll have something in your hand that you can play on the turn before Flame Strike to protect the rest of your board, so that if he Flame Strikes, you get some good face damage and you can reload. So the power of Flame Strike has been lowered, and also Flame Strike is a good aggro deterrent. And if you're seeing a little bit less aggro, the Flame Strike is also a little less good. It's still a very powerful card, of course, but everything's kind of moving away from the Flame Strike. The rare cards are Fallen Hero, Effigy. Fallen Hero, great card. Effigy, it doesn't... See, this is the kind of opposite of Competitive Spirit for the Paladin, right? It doesn't change. Only in rare situations where you have a card that actually costs a lot of mana but puts out a little body, like Anti-Keelbot, and then you have another card that puts out that is less mana, like a Yeti, but puts out a larger body. You would normally, if you were playing around Duplicate, you would kill the Anti-Keelbot and say, whatever, right? If he keeps anti-tempoing himself just to heal, I'm going to get so far ahead. But now, you may not want to do that, because they'll get a 5 mana minion instead of a 4 mana minion. Small considerations, though. Doesn't really change the way you play. And Fallen Hero, we did that. So Polymorph Boar is the last card. Transform a minion to a 4/2 boar with charge. Obviously the best card in the game. But going back, hard removals. This is a rare card, so it's not the most commonly seen hard removal, but it's a very good rare card. And so you're still going to see it. And now Mage's hard removal frequency has not only gone up by 1 common card, but also by a rare card. Yeah, you get a boar, but when you change it to like 2, when you change your opponent's minion to 2 health and you silence it, it's still a pretty good hard removal. Arcane Blast, not much to say here. Kodara Drake, we've already covered it. Control card, right? You put it out on some turn, and then the next turn, assuming it stays alive, you can just get card advantage by pinging if you're playing that game where you're both top decking. So Mage looks like it's going to do just fine in this meta, and I think everyone knows it. Everyone predicts Mage is going to come out on top of the meta. I don't disagree. I think it was on top, it stays on top. It's Mage. Rogue, on the other hand, is going in a very different direction than it has been going. And Blizzard kind of snuck this in, right? The first card Blizzard showed us was the Shadowpan Cavalry. And we're like, oh, no one was surprised. It fit into the whole theme where they released like a new bar first, and then they released some other fairly slow cards. I can't remember what. So the Goblin Auto Barber was the only fast card that the Rogue got. Actually, it's not even slow cards. They just released bad cards for the Rogue in GVG and MBRM. But the Auto Barber was the only fast card the Rogue got. And it was a card you kind of wanted to like hold on to, right? It's a good 2-drop tempo thing that Rogues played, but it's also good for later as well. So when the Shadowpan Cavalry came down, it was like, okay, you still don't want Rogue to go fast. You still want Rogue to go slow. Good job, Blizzard. And then these 2 cards came. So, a Buccaneer and an Undercity Valiant. This is definitely good for tempo, and this is even better than just the fact that you have 2 drops that you can play for tempo. You have an actual consistent 2-drop. That's the more important part of this whole thing. You used to have a Goblin Auto Barber as the only early curve card the Rogue had. No 1-drops, No 2-drops. Defias can only be played on turn 2 half the time, and even then, unless you want to dagger up to turn 2, which is okay, but not the best thing as a follow-up. You need another card as well. No 3-drops, and their 4-drop is the Anubar Ambusher, which kind of anti-tempos you like pretty soon after. This is a 3-2, which provides the tempo stability and the consistency that the rogues need. I think we've all been taking a little for granted just how plentiful the 2s are in today's meta. And I think we've all forgotten how you used to draft in Nax. It used to be, you see a 2, you took it. And if you didn't take it, you were going to get screwed with only 4 2-drops, like half the time. It's not going to be that bad, of course. GVG really solved that problem. But we're going to go back to be fairly close to that kind of situation with the card frequencies and how it's being offered. So a class like the Warrior that still has pretty much no 2-drop is going to be very disproportionately hurt by it. And a class like the Rogue, which only had 1 2-drop, was also going to be pretty significantly hurt by it. But now it has 2, and it's out of that kind of danger zone. And it even has a 1 that you can just drop. So once again, it's a good one too. I didn't talk about it yet, but besides the fact that it's a pirate, and pirates actually matter for Rogue, because you can actually trigger like Ship's Cannon, because your pirate consistency is a bit higher, and you want to pick pirates. They synergize well with weapons. But on top of that, you drop this on turn 1. On turn 2, you weapon up. It's like a 1-mana version of Auto Barber that's a little more unstable and a little clunky, but you can play it on curve without needing the coin. So the Rogue is one of the few classes that got faster, despite the Shadowpan Cavalry, which I thought was going to make the Rogue actually play slower. The Rogue actually, his ability to play faster got a boost compared to the other classes. And that's very important, because the Rogue hero power, first of all, it doesn't quite fit into the Inspire mechanic, right? It's the best hero power in the beginning. If you have an Inspire card in the beginning, it's wonderful. But by the time you really get minions down, except for like 1 or 2 Inspire minions, by the time you get these like high-value Inspire minions, you don't really want to be taking damage to your face anymore. The things that are out on the board are like so high health. That's something a Mage pings. It's not something a Rogue pings. And so your hero power gets a little useless. And if you have a weapon out already, your hero power is actually unplayable. So the Rogue is always kind of weird in the way that we're shifting towards the control meta. But it also has tools, right? What tools do the Rogue have? The Rogue has 2 hard removals, which makes it right behind the Mage. Priest questionably also has 2. Mind Control, yes, it's a hard removal, but that's turn 10, which even and when I say control, like it's going to slow down, it's going to slow down by like 1 turn, right? Like 1.5 turns at most. So 10 mana is still kind of a lot. Rogue has Sap, which is 2 mana. Yeah, it'll come out again the next turn, but if you have like 6 mana and you throw 2 mana out to his 5-drop, his 6-drop, and that goes back into his hand, you've gained so much tempo that you're fine unless you get Flame Striked. And you also have Assassinate, right, which is a hard removal. So yeah, Shadowpan Cavalry, by the way, is actually a 5-drop. We were like trying to value it in terms of how cool we are with it being played on turn 5, and the answer is like very okay with no combos, because a 3/7 on 5, as it turns out, is not all that bad. So the rare cards for the Rogue, I'm not even going to, we already did Cut Purse, we already did, which again, 2-drop consistency, right? You drop it on turn 2, you're kind of fine with it being out there because it can do things if it doesn't get removed. Burgle allows the Rogue to go a little more into the late game. It's a similar option to Sprint. So one thing is Rogue was never totally dead in the water if the late game happens, but because of Sprint mostly. And so Sprint's value is going to go a little higher with a slightly slower meta. But more importantly, with these kinds of tempo plays that the Rogue has, and we're going to go back a little and go to the Undercity Valiant, where if you play it later on, you get 1 free ping damage that doesn't hurt your face. All of these kinds of little swingy tempo plays allow the Rogue to do what it does best, right? Which is kind of play a little control at the beginning, but then at around turn 5, turn 6, when your opponents are dropping these 5-drops, dropping these 6-drops, dropping these big minions, you're very efficiently removing these minions, and you're exploding onto the board, and then you deal lethal. So that strategy will still be, I think it'll always be, it's going to be hard to take that away from the Rogue. It'll always be this very viable strategy. And if you're a very control-heavy deck based on either large minions or even large minions with a removal attached to like the Kraken, you're still vulnerable to this kind of burst damage, and the rogue is capable of it. It's a little more RPS now with some of the healing spells, but as we'll see when we go to something like a shaman, healing spells are still not that great. Okay, and then the Shady Dealer, if you have a Pyre, gain +1/+1, more Pyre synergies. But otherwise, a rare, but also a 3-mana card, which the Rogue, as we said before, was kind of in need of. So very good. And Beneath the Grounds, this card, my thoughts on it are very, very scattered right now. It can be good, because unlike Gang Up, you don't have to like draw a card and play it. It just kind of comes out for free. So yeah, you use 1 extra mana, but you get so much more tempo later on. And presumably, for any of these effects to trigger, whether it's Gang Up or Beneath the Grounds, they're going to have to draw it anyway. It's obviously not going to be a great card, because the draw consistency is very low. And which means you need something like... You need to at least draw 2 Nerubians for this to even vaguely make sense. Like, your opponent needs to draw it. And if you can draw 3, it would definitely make sense. But it's more of a combo card for something like Mill Rogue or something, right? And then Poison Blade I'm not going to talk about because it sucks and no one will pick it. And so it's not going to be even in the arena meta. And for the Rogue, what I would expect also is more weapon usage, because there's less other decks going face. When other decks don't go face, you feel safer using your weapon. Right now, as the Rogue, you're always kind of iffy, right? You still have to use the weapon for the tempo, otherwise you wouldn't pick the Rogue. But you're very, very susceptible to being burst down. You're playing this game on the edge of your seat, basically, and that'll feel a little more safe as your opponent gets a couple more of those like big drops that you can efficiently remove, as your opponent has less and less reach in their decks, as your opponent just play a slower game so they're less able to be on the board and deal face damage to you. And with more trading, also the same thing. So I think Rogue will kind of go back a little to where it used to be in Classic, which is, I think at that point it was a pretty clear second best class. So the key cards for the Rogue, Sap, we've talked about it a lot. That's going to be such a good card. If you're playing a control meta, you have a lot of cards anyway. And if you're the Rogue and you want to like screw with that meta and you want to go a bit faster, Sap is a hard removal. That's all it is. You remove like a 5-mana card on turn 5. What's he going to do? Play it on turn 6 and lose a mana? Sure, then you go face and you've dealt a lot of damage already. He better have a heal. Sprint, obviously a good card, and for a control meta, in case you're worried about running out of steam, right? If both people are playing for the card advantage and both people are playing top decks, well, if you're on the board and you can afford to pass one turn, or it's turn 10, you play Sprint and then you combo out like an Eviscerate or something and get some of that tempo back, you're up 3 cards on your opponent. That's a big swing. And one card I think is a kind of a mix of the things we were talking about that's going to get better is Assassin's Blade. It's not very good right now. It used to be pretty good in Classic, and I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be good again. It's a weapon. It still synergizes with a lot of the Rogue stuff that synergizes with weapons, and the problem always was that it was always so slow to get it up. But if people are playing a little more control, and you have your hard removals that other classes don't, well, Assassin's Blade looks pretty good at getting rid of those pesky, smaller things, especially when your draft consistency for your Eviscerates, your Deadly Poisons, your Backstabs are lower. So I think the Assassin's Blade could kind of fill that gap again a little. I'm not saying it's going to become a great card, but right now it's being rated lower than like a 2-drop, right? And I think it may be one of those cards that can become a win condition again. So that's it for the Paladin, the Mage, and the Rogue. Those were the top 3 classes in the BRM meta and the GVG meta, and Paladin is going to drop a bit, but I think Rogue and Mage are only getting stronger with how everything shakes out. Because remember, the thing with the Rogue is that if everybody goes slower, that doesn't mean that going slower is better for you. That just means that chances are the decks that you're going to build, because of the offering percentages, are going to be slower. It could still be possible that aggro decks get better in the meta, even as everything slows down. Maybe because everything slows down. So there's kind of a dichotomy here, and both of these statements could be true. So if the meta slows down by 30% and aggro decks gain a plus 10% chance to win, you're still going to see, even in the high win percentages, more control decks than aggro decks. Much less the fact that today, even in the current meta, you see more control decks or more like tempo-y mid-range decks when you're at 10, 11, 12 wins, then you see aggro decks, even though this is like an aggro meta, even in the arena. So we're definitely still shifting slower, but that doesn't mean you can't go fast. And the rogue is equipped for that. The mage just got overall better, and the meta is like moving very much in the mage's direction. And the paladin got worse, and the meta is moving against its direction. And that's where the top 3 classes are going. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out, and if I'm right or if I am just totally way off base on this. But it's something to think about. And when you start playing, especially when the meta settled down a little, right? Like, one thing to remember is when everything first starts, it's crazy for like the first 2 weeks. No one has any idea what's going on. There is really no meta. But then it settles down a bit, and we'll see if I'm right or not. Next up is going to be the warrior, the hunter, and the priest, which are our current 3 worst classes. And we will for BRM and GVG, and we'll see why they're not so good right now, and we'll see whether the Grand Tournament will make them better, or if they will become worse, or if they will become much, much unbelievably, what are you thinking, Blizzard, worse. I'll let you guess which class fits into that category. This is ADWCTUA Adwikta. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and yeah, see you next time.